economic freedom than in ones with less. And if you look around the world, the most destructive thing for humanity are wars. They literally take economic resources that could have been used to build houses or clothes or food for people to eat, and instead they divert those economic resources that would have been used to make the world a better place for everybody, and they use it to build things like guns and bombs and tanks to murder people around the world. Well, countries with more economic freedom engage in less of that sort of thing. So if you want to see less guns and bombs and tanks being used to murder people around the world, you should be supporting more economic freedom around the world. Thank you. And it's really hard to be happy if you're having, guns or bombs or tanks roaming around your neighborhood. And so in countries with more economic freedom, you have a higher self-reported happiness of the citizens living in those countries. So if you want people to be happy, economic freedom is the way to go. And this is another one that I think is really important. We have less corruption and bribery in countries with the more economic freedom. And we can stop and think for a moment, why would that be the case? Well, in an economically free country, if you want to start a business, you basically just do it. If you want to buy or sell a product with your neighbor, you basically just do it. And you don't have to ask for permission. Free people just engage in free trade with others, and that's the end of it. But in countries with less economic freedom, you have to ask for permission for every last little step of everything. And oftentimes, the easiest way to get that permission is to bribe a bureaucrat. And that's why you see much more corruption and bribery in countries with less economic freedom than in countries with more economic freedom. And here we have some fantastic charts that you can see in a picture form. Countries with more economic freedom have a much, much higher standard of level of income for the poorest 10% of society. And in dark green is the countries with the most economic freedom, and in red are countries with the least economic freedom. The correlation is incredibly clear. And here we have the same correlation with income per capita. The more economic freedom a country has, the higher the income per capita in that country, and a very, very clear correlation. And adult literacy as well. Countries with more economic freedom have more people who know how to read, and countries with less economic freedom have fewer people that know how to read. And life expectancy. Countries with more economic freedom have people who live longer than countries with less economic freedom. Here's a chart, plain as day. Unemployment. Countries with more economic freedom have less unemployment. Countries with more regulation as to what is required to start a business or to hire somebody or to do this or do that, well, guess what? The more hurdles you put in the way of the economy, the fewer economic activity you're going to have, and the more economic unemployment you're going to have as a result of that. So here we can see very clearly countries with more economic freedom have less unemployment, and countries with more economic control of the economy have more unemployment. Infant mortality, right? Everybody loves babies. Well, in countries with more economic freedom, fewer children die at childbirth. So if you want to see more children surviving childbirth and growing into adulthood and making the world a better place, countries with more economic freedom enable that to happen as well. And in countries with less economic freedom, you literally have more babies dying at childbirth. That's really, really important. And children in the labor force. A lot of people get confused and think that in first world countries we don't have kids in the labor force because politicians passed laws forbidding kids from entering the labor force. But the real reason is that through economic freedom, we were able to raise the standard of living of everybody, and children no longer had to be forced into the labor force when they were forced between having to choose between working and being able to eat. So in countries like the UK and Switzerland and Hong Kong and these other economically free places, you don't have kids working in the labor force because the society has become wealthy enough where they no longer have to. Whereas in countries with less economic freedom, you have less economic prosperity and children are still forced into the labor force because of that economic circumstance. And it's worth pointing out that correlation doesn't prove causation, but we've seen example after example after example in both theory and in practice, and I think we can make some really, really strong inferences there. And that brings me to why I'm so excited about Bitcoin Cash and digital currencies in general, because its impact on economic freedom is that it makes it easier for anyone to start a business anywhere. It enforces property rights, it promotes free trade, it enables freedom of contract, and a really fun one, it enables people to opt out of corrupt systems. And we're seeing an example of a pretty darn corrupt system in Venezuela right now. What if we manage to do a good enough job getting the word out to all these people in Venezuela that they don't have to participate in that stupid corrupt system where the politicians are printing as much money as they want every day to pay for all sorts of things and impoverishing the people as a result? Well, let's help spread that word, because there's only so much each of us can do individually, but all of us together can really make a big impact on the entire world by spreading the news that digital currencies are here and they're available to everyone to help bring more economic freedom to the entire world. And I'll end here with a quote from Brian Armstrong. He says, "If we can create more economic freedom in the world, it will serve as a giant economic stimulus package for the world, accelerate innovation, reduce wars, make the 10% better off, the poorest 10% better off, and everybody else too, overthrow corrupt governments," that's an exciting one, "and raise happiness." And I say Bitcoin Cash and digital currencies are the best tools the world has ever had to accomplish these goals. So thank you all very much. If you like it, tell your friends to get started today with Bitcoin. Bitcoin.com is the website. Tell a friend, come visit us at the booth, and we'll set you up with your first Bitcoin Cash wallet if you don't have one already. That's my time. Thank you very much.
Roger Ver. All right, next up we have a panel discussion, so we have to do a little bit of furniture moving here. Hold on a second. All right, don't forget, guys, pictures, video, absolutely encouraged. Hashtag WBF London. That's WBF London. Don't forget to follow us, of course, on Twitter, Facebook, all the fun social media apps. I know we got a whole very active Twitter feed going on today, thanks to Claire. Where is she? Is she? Hello. I've been watching your feed all day. Very nice. All right, where's Dr. Mo? Ladies and gentlemen, to lead today's panel, Dr. Mo Levin.
Thank you. We're going to wait for our last panelist to join us on stage. We've got another exciting panel here, talking about the state of crypto, something that's on a lot of people's minds. I'll let everybody introduce themselves, starting with you, Richard.
Hi, Richard Crook. I head emerging technologies for World Bank Scotland. You've seen us in amongst the crypto space, looking after things like R3 and building Corda.
Philip, the co-founder and CTO of Delta. Hopefully you have seen us around and what we do. We do portfolio tracking manager, and we help our investors inform themselves about how cryptocurrency is doing and the right moves to do from there.
Hi, this is Mate Tokay. I'm the CEO at Bitcoin.com. Hopefully you've seen Roger's presentation. Bitcoin.com is a one-stop shop for everything that's related to Bitcoin Cash. And I've been in the crypto space since 2013. And I'm just fascinated by the industry, the community. I love the speech I love the fire talk that you had with Gabe. The community is important, so let's talk about that as well.
Hi, I'm Eddie Chavez. I'm the CEO of Coincilium. We're a company whose shares are traded here in London on a stock exchange, and we have been investing in this space, blockchain, since 2013.
Iqbal Gandham. I'm the MD of eToro here in the UK. We like to spend an inordinate amount of money educating everybody about cryptos, and we're a trading investment platform. I'm also the chair of the Crypto Association here in the UK.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about the community, where we are in educating the majority of people about these things, because it seems like we're still in the early days. At the Royal Bank of Scotland, I'm sure there's many conversations you have trying to teach them why this is important. How is that going?
So I think the first thing to recognise is a lot of people, certainly in this room and back in the inside of the banks, want to understand how the minutiae of the blockchain works. And as you all know, there's many of those in a large family known as distributed ledger technologies. I think it's worth recognizing that the majority of people here don't understand or need to understand what GPS works. They just know that it's in their phone and it shows them the location on the surface of the planet. What's really good to see is over the last year, the technology is starting to drift out of sight, and that's being handed over to some of the larger open source communities, the Linux Foundation being a good example. And that gives us the opportunity to lift the conversation away from the technology and actually the application of the technology. The internet wasn't useful until someone worked out you could buy books on it.
Sure. As applications that use this technology that are running on it, and this is great for you, Mate, and for you, Philip, the increase in amount of users and easy-to-use platform you have, what are you seeing in numbers growth in usage of the app?
Yeah, I think that the growth has been staggering. Definitely end of last year, beginning of this year, the number was crazy, and people were checking their applications all the time, trying to see how their investments are performing. Of course, as the price goes down, their attention span drops as well, and people are less interested in checking the price. But definitely we see increased usage in general, and like there's a huge promise into the future. If you even look at how many Bitcoin addresses are created since the beginning of the year, or Ethereum addresses are being created since the beginning of the year, we are seeing immense numbers. Like there's 100% increase in Ethereum addresses being created. There's 50% increase in Bitcoin addresses being created. So the numbers are there, and the adoption is coming. People are exploring what is possible, and I think that is very interesting to look into the future.
And they're seeing and they're learning. Bitcoin.com has their own news portal, which is tremendous.
Right, the news is really important. What I suppose what's even more important when it comes to education and people, of course, following the trends, and a lot more people download wallets, and a lot more people buy digital currencies and Bitcoin Cash and other currencies as well, is to understand what's really behind the technology. One part is that we will have to come to a point where people don't need to understand what's going on, just like how people don't understand how to use their Visa or MasterCard cards. They just use it in their everyday lives. Unfortunately, cryptocurrencies are not at that stage yet. These are the times where people need to understand that and need to understand what they're buying into, because otherwise what's going to happen is that the price of crypto just goes up and people jump on the ship, and then as soon as the price goes down, they jump off the ship, and eventually that creates multiple bubbles. What's important is to educate them what they're buying into, and by educating, it's just like Roger always says, like, tell your friends, tell your family, have them to download a wallet, send them a little bit of Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. We suggest Bitcoin Cash because it's not doable on the Bitcoin core chain anymore, unfortunately, to send little transactions. But let's not get into the debate at this time. But have them use it. Everyone loves to save. Show them First.io. You can save up to 20-25% buying anything on Amazon. That's a great use case as well. Just have people use it.
Eddie, the institutional investors have been coming into the space since 2010, and they still haven't made it their way yet. What are you seeing? You know, Coincilium is on the London Stock Exchange. You deal with retail investors and institutional investors. You see what's going on in Asia with the investors. And what is your read on the environment from investors and educating investors about what's going on?
So, well, we're close to the entrepreneurs, and my experience with entrepreneurs is that in the 2013 period, when a few startups start to emerge and a few real deals and real investment rounds start to happen, they were quite frustrated with the lack of knowledge by traditional investors. So that's why we came into this space. So both to invest, but also to help them educate the investors as well, and that's one of the reasons why we are on a stock exchange in London, is because we also wanted to show the world that, you know, this is a serious sector, it's a legitimate sector, it's one in which you know, all kinds of investors should invest. For me, the way I look at it in the more recent years is 2017 has attracted a lot of new investors. We could call it the year of mass speculation. I think this year is more around regulation. You know, it's a bit of a effect after all this money that went in. People start to look at what have they invested in, and and the regulation aspect of it as well, of course. And hopefully, maybe 2019 we reach that very sought-after goal of mass adoption. But I would say that mass adoption, in my opinion, should come again through Bitcoin, because we have started in this space through Bitcoin. We have moved from Bitcoin to Ethereum to smart contracts, and then eventually to tokens. So I'm not 100% sure that people will go directly to tokens as well. So I think it's quite interesting to see where mass adoption will come from at this stage.
Maybe Iqbal, you can comment on that. It's hard not to see a taxi with eToro and crypto on it around the city. It's amazing. What is your experience being opening up these crypto markets and new people that have been on eToro starting using these instruments?
So I think if you have a look at the evolution of the customer in 2017, at least on our platform, in Q1 we had, I think the people in this room, people who understood blockchain, people who understood Bitcoin. In Q2, the audience morphed slightly. So they were individuals who probably didn't work in the blockchain industry, but were developers, system engineers, techies. And then in Q3, the audience shifted again, and it was customers who were in fintech. So they may have, say, Monzo on their phone, or they might be using Nutmeg as a wealth manager, but they were into fintech, they understood fintech, and they had, they were part of the next generation. Q4 was everybody. And you could check, you could detect that with the search queries that people were using to come to our website. So in Q1 and Q2, BTCX. So they were looking for a Bitcoin exchange. In Q4, where do I buy Bitcoin? So the search queries also changed and became mass market. To address the point on regulation and education, I think it's important that we do educate customers, but there's different levels of education. I think to the mass market, if we start discussing cryptography and blockchain and smart contracts, etc., it's a wasted conversation. But I think industry and government needs to understand these things, because if blockchain is really going to help them solve some of their problems. I think the Venn diagram today, if you have a look between individuals who understand blockchain and the ones who have a problem where blockchain can be used, the overlap is really small. We need to increase that overlap. The government has hundreds of millions of dollars which it wants to use to help solve some of the problems that it has in supply chain management, in logistics, etc., etc. The same problems that we're saying that blockchain is going to help solve. So we need to educate them at the level that they understand. And unfortunately, we're really bad at that. We speak a completely different language today. When we talk about blockchain and crypto, we just take it on a level, and before we know it, we're talking about lightning networks and atomic swaps. And people over here are saying, well, can you just explain what immutable databases are to us? So I think there's an important thing on education. The customers themselves have changed, and I think the gentleman next to me from Coinsilium is correct. That regulation, this year's about regulation. We all know at the end of September, start of October, the Crypto Asset Task Force will hopefully be publishing their framework and their report for regulation in the UK, which I think will be a really, really positive movement. I've just come from Parliament just now, and there are MPs now having open conversations about asking questions in Parliament about blockchain, about crypto. So I think the sentiment has changed. The Bank of England sentiment at the start of this year was, it's negative, it's money laundering, it's really bad, it's poisonous, it's going to kill everybody, etc., etc. And now the sentiment is, well, we need to have a look at this, and we need to have an open and honest conversation about it. So I think definitely moving in the positive thing. One last thing, pair of socks. I need to get Bitcoin socks.
I'll get you one.
Okay.
Any comments on regulation internally in the bank that echo these feelings?
Yeah, I think if you look broadly across the market, Q1 we're watching the SEC looking for someone to go toe-to-toe with. Coinbase stepped up, and we've been watching that over in the US. What we've also been watching on the European side is a different conversation, and that's really sort of culminated in things like the GDF, who've put a good level of effort around it. That gives us now a regulatory glide path that we can start seeing. If you watch what's going on with the G20 early this year, July, they'll come back in October. You will see that task force coming back with actions. It's a very standard routine. It's a movie we've seen before. If you have an emerging market which grows to $500 billion in size, people are going to set up, the incumbents are going to sit up and start taking notice. They can avoid it and they can ignore it until such point as it's an emerging market. And that's what you would describe the crypto space right now. And to that end, regulation is a cert. There are a small number, a minority now that's hopefully getting smaller in the crypto space that would just actually like regulation not to be there and they'd like to carry on with no regulation. That's not going to happen. You're going to see regulation coming in. The real conversation going on at that G20 central bank, as if we're reading the minutes correctly, is actually they don't want to overdo the regulation because they will just snuff out all of the innovation and you will just make crypto look like any other financial market. On the other side of it, they can't leave it as a Wild West because if they do, all of the regulated entities will simply discard their licenses and walk across the street and become unregulated. So there's a balance and a trade-off going on here. It is being played out in the two main jurisdictions that I would expect you to follow. There is more to it than just the US jurisdiction. The Europeans and the EU are having a different debate, and that's quite interesting to follow too.
But are you being affected by these things? Have you been affected by regulation in your company, or do you find that Delta is an information provider that kind of sits outside?
Well, what we provide is trustworthy information, right? That is our main goal. We need to be transparent, we are transparent. We need to provide our investors with the right information so that they can be informed and make the right decision from it after their trades. And I agree, like with what you said as well, is that, and what the other people said is, indeed, like there was a lot of exuberance in the end of last year and beginning of this year, and of course the information needs to be there to educate those people and to show them what really is happening in the field, rather than this, you know, over exuberance, like what happened. A lot of people think that it's a negative thing, but I personally believe that indeed it started the conversation about regulation. It brought a lot of attention to developers who moved from one industry to another, which expands the talent pool, expands the eyeballs on blockchain technologies, on even the layers on top, building applications and protocols on top of this existing infrastructure. And I think all this attention and talent will help us to go to the next steps.
It's an interesting insight, and I think you're right that crypto is benefiting and getting punished by being in the limelight, which is increased regulation, increasing views on it, but also the talent pool is growing. Talk about talent for a second. At Bitcoin.com, you continue to launch new ideas, new projects, new revenue streams. Could you talk about how it's been finding any talent in the company? Can you talk about finding talent, new talent to join the company? How has that been compared to last year? Is there more or less talent available to hire?
That's a really good point that you're bringing up. I think talent is absolutely fantastic in the industry. There are more and more people entering the cryptocurrency space and the blockchain space as well. And we're really happy to see that. People are interested, people want to join, and people want to educate themselves as well. And we're getting a lot of great talents at the company as well. So.
Are you finding it easier to find good talent?
Yeah, it's getting easier because people are now really looking at these industries and they look at it as the next hot industry to be in, and literally you can feel, you can sense the fear of missing out feeling for these people. Like, I need to be in this industry. I'd rather quit my job. I'd rather just leave the company that I've been working for many years and leave that behind just because I want to join this industry. And I think this is really fascinating.
I think we're seeing and going to see more and more job migration. Are you seeing 100%. The same thing, Eddie?
In terms of the employment around people with skills in this space, well, I mean, this has been, since the beginning, a big hurdle for a lot of startups. What we have seen in the last few years is a lot of people moving out of banks, of financial institutions, of the big four firms, and going towards blockchain for various reasons. I guess sometimes they were just getting a bit frustrated as well about how far they could go, right, in this space. And of course, everybody has some personal interest and personal objective of doing something maybe on a different scale. But from across the industry, there is still, of course, a shortage of talent. I mean, yes, more developers are learning, and hopefully we get more and more tools that enable developers from, let's say, a non-blockchain background to come easily on board and start helping these startups. But as an investor, we always look for the, the rare entrepreneur who has already been in this space for 4 or 5 years, has done already a couple of good startups and has some experience in it. And of course, that's extremely rare, and that's what you find usually in the projects that raise a lot of money and are doing quite well these days.
I would say I have a contrarian opinion to talent in this space. I think the ICOs didn't help because they gave everybody the belief that you could write a white paper and become a millionaire. If you can do that, then why work for anybody else? And secondly, the moment individuals have downloaded a wallet onto their mobile phone, they change their LinkedIn profile and say blockchain guru. And it's really, really difficult to find good talent. Everybody who has slightest insight into how blockchain works or has read Mastering Bitcoin, the book, a couple of times, has said, right, we can do everything blockchain, and they've all been working on it since 2010, ironically. 2 years ago, nobody had worked in blockchain, and now everybody's employed since 2010 in blockchain. So we've struggled finding good talent, or should I say, filtering out good talent. So.
Do you have any comments on trends globally, Eddie? You spent a lot of time in Asia, Singapore. Compare that to the European market as it relates to blockchain growth and adoption there.
Well, I mean, there are differences which are known in the tech world, not necessarily only in blockchain. I mean, my experience with China and Asia in general is that they're quite quick to grasp the latest trend, latest advancements, and of course there's been a huge wave of entrepreneurs and tech people and commercial as well going into blockchain. Right now in China, places like Hangzhou, where Alibaba headquarters are, or at least were for the beginning of the years of Alibaba, and quite attractive to a lot of innovative Chinese startups. And Singapore as well. We invested in a company called Indoors, for example, in Singapore. A team who has been working for a while in smart contracts, but now there are many very talented people working on projects in Singapore, in Thailand, in Taiwan. So it's quite, very, very active, very dynamic. But this kind of dynamism and activity in general I wouldn't say it's only in blockchain, right? It's in tech in general. Asia is usually quite dynamic in that space. But what we will see is, will there be, for example, some special help, maybe governments pushing for that, Been very surprised that from the beginning, or let's say my beginning, let's say 2013, for example, governments have not pushed more than that, because really it's a great opportunity for jobs, right? I mean, we have companies here who are hiring, and definitely yours is hiring in different locations, and all these startups, all these companies that have raised a lot of money, they're hiring all over the world. So I think they should be more helped by, public authorities to go into that direction, offer high quality employment and innovative companies and solutions.